Let's start with the biggest story of the week that isn't actually in today's papers. So I know that you are friends and former colleagues with Huw Edwards. I think it's interesting. I was expecting more coverage. What we've got is commentary. What's your reflection on how the Sundays have treated a story which, at the end of the day, was dominating the headlines in the week?
Yes, well, as you say, I mean, for me, it's a very sad personal story. So whenever I am looking at the coverage, I'm thinking, and I wonder what Huw is thinking and how is he getting on. So I'm looking at it from a very personal point of view.
Yeah.
So for me, the dismay, really, is not so much why don't we know more, it's almost could we just calm down a bit, could we have a bit of a pause? And I'm pleased to say the Sunday newspapers in general have not carried out any further investigations. Now, this follows the lead taken by The Sun, who said we are not going to go into any more allegations. We're going to hand over the evidence we've got to the BBC inquiry. This doesn't mean to say that you don't eventually want to go over the details and argue about what happened. It's not a question of, oh, we mustn't talk about these things ever. It's just this is a very difficult moment when the person involved, the main person involved, is suffering from mental health issues. And that's what I feel very strongly about.
Fair enough and well said. Let's move on to some of the reportage that is happening. And as is ever the case, there's a huge amount of scrutiny of Toryism and the Conservative Party. I'm calling it Tory Exodus latest. The idea of Ben Wallace quitting had been kind of in the ether, but having confirmed it in the Sunday Times, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I must say I'm surprised. You know, maybe he felt, oh, it was coming out and he had to confirm it. But you don't normally have a cabinet minister saying, I'm going, but not straight away.
Yes.
I'll go when there's a reshuffle, and then, by the way, I'm leaving Parliament.
Yeah.
Because you're then left as Defence Secretary in a lame duck position.
Yeah.
And you think of his position internationally, and he's warning about war on three fronts and the dangers from Russia, the dangers from China. It does seem to be... It's almost as if we don't know the full story here. What is he thinking about?
Well, he's cited family difficulties as well, hasn't he, in the past, and he's talked about how being a minister has affected his family life. But as you say, he faces the accusation that he's leaving at a time of great importance for our defence strategy. Also, is he now going to be forcing Rishi Sunak into this reshuffle sooner than Rishi Sunak might have planned? Well,
he told Rishi Sunak, apparently, we're told, in June, OK, so he knew. Somehow it came out, or was beginning to be rumoured about, but they could have brushed that off. You know, people talking about, well, you know, will President Biden stand again, all that kind of thing. This happens, it's part of normal political life, but to actually announce it and then not say, oh, by the way, I'm leaving this afternoon, it's very unusual. And I must say, I think this question about his family and talking about his family at this stage, again, is you know, saying that he regrets putting his job before his family. Well, that's very personal, isn't it?
Yes.
And although it's obviously complicated, he didn't get the NATO job, there's this and there's that. Does he think the Tories aren't going to win the next election? Well, is he another of these people leaving?
The implication of this, and I think Tim Shipman in the Sunday Times, who's done this interview, sort of referring to Conservatives leaving like rats from a sinking ship, it does have the aura of that. I mean, this is a senior figure that was once touted to be the next Prime Minister. Off he goes. He said he'd rather work in a bar.
I know. No, that's why I think I have a feeling that it's one of those stories which we're going to hear more about.
Yes.
That he may feel in his interview that he's covered all the grounds. Yes, I want to do this. He's covered the point about his constituency going because of the boundary changes. Yeah. But it seems that he was offered. There was a possibility of other seats, which often happens.
5 safe seats, so he could have gone somewhere else.
He could have gone somewhere else. And, of course, the problem for Rishi Sunak is that he's a very well-respected minister.
Yes.
And some people...
And experience, because some people are saying, look, this cabinet isn't fit for purpose, you need to bring in some grey hairs. Maybe he will now. I mean, let's see how this... It's meant to be a summer reset, reshuffle. Let's see how it goes. The timing, though, John, ahead of these by-elections, terrible, isn't it?
It is
How do you think the by-elections are going to pan out?
Well, I think they're going to be very difficult for the Conservatives. Yeah. I mean, very, very difficult indeed. The opinion polls overall are saying that. Now, of course, you shouldn't judge each individual by-election. There are often differences. But the general sort of thing, are they ready to have by-elections? Are they ready to face the public? And the answer must be no, they're not ready.
Yes. Let's have a look at some of the strategy on this. We've called it Operation Gloves Off versus Operation Gag On. We say that because there's a story in the Sunday Times saying Tories desperate to woo back their fed-up base. Where do they start? They talk about inheritance tax cuts. Then at the same time, you've got Starmer telling his party, we can't spend our way back to power. So it seems as if the Conservatives are now coming up with retail offers, while Starmer's strategy is to just stay stum and hope that all of the attention is taken up by the Tories imploding. What do you think of those strategies?
I think it's interesting. I mean, let's start with Labour, because in a way that's obvious. They've always got, as they move towards being, or they hope to move towards, from not being so much the party of opposition, but the government in waiting. Now, that means they've got to be much more careful about the accusation. We know what they're like. They'll promise to put up taxes and they'll spend more. That's what Labour does. Now, that's a very powerful image, which some people will go on holding. So you can't win over everybody. But elections, of course, are won in the middle. They're won by people who think, oh, I wonder how I would be affected by this.
Yes.
So Keir Starmer is quite right to stress that we were going to make sure that we won't promise things we can't deliver. They've got to build up their credibility. This is how, after all, Tony Blair won and Gordon Brown won in the past, by making it clear that, you know, they will stick to their rules and all the rest of it. I think on the government side, so much depends on, frankly, how confident are they in winning the election.
Yes. If
they were confident, they wouldn't need to talk necessarily about inheritance tax in this way. They've tried this before. George Osborne tried it before the 2010 election. And there was a great surge of excitement, and it put Gordon Brown off an immediate election, if you remember. So that was, for 3 years, that sort of meant the election didn't happen because of this. And then George Osborne again went on about this after he was Chancellor. So they try it on because people just think, oh, great, tax cuts.
But, I mean, they do need to provide something that Tories can kind of cling on to, because
Sure.
I find it funny they talk in this language of it needs to be a retail offer. Well, it just needs to be a Conservative policy that might be in danger of actually encouraging people to vote for them. I mean, John, it's slightly desperate, isn't it?
Well, I think the trouble is they seem to be more connected with what the opinion polls are saying and what the people say in answer to various questions in focus groups. That isn't the way to do it. No, I mean, what people want is a sense of belief. They know the way they're going. The only way they can win the election is by saying, look, it's the direction of travel.
Yes.
What we're trying to do is we're getting inflation down. We've not succeeded yet, but don't let Labour ruin it, is the old cry. From elections past. It's still a powerful slogan, but to make sure you build it up, you've got to be consistent at every level in saying, this is the way we're going, this is what we're trying to do.
Be clear about your strategy. John Sargent, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Lovely to speak to you.